The execution of Roy Lee Ward, Indiana's October 10th death sentence. On October 10th, 2025, before the sun rises over Michigan City, Indiana, the state will end the life of a man whose name has haunted courtrooms and prison cells for nearly a quarter of a century. Roy Lee Ward. His crime? The brutal rape and murder of 15-year-old Stacy Payne back in 2001 in a quiet southern Indiana town that would never be the same. We re-diving into the disturbing story of Roy Lee Ward from the moment he broke into the Payne family home, to his decades of appeals, his desperate last bid for clemency, and finally, to the needle filled with Pentobarbital that waits for him inside Indiana State Prison. This crime is brutal, dark, and disgusting. Over time, it has left no one indifferent, and neither will you. Please like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. The crime, July 11th, 2001. Dale, Indiana. The town of Dale, located in southwestern Spencer County, is a small, close-knit community. It was supposed to be an ordinary summer morning in the Payne household. 15-year-old Stacy Payne was awake, waiting for her ride to work. She was a bright, responsible teen. People described her as caring, hardworking, and protective of her younger sister Melissa. Melissa, 14, was still asleep in her room. The rest of the family had already left for the day, were home alone in their rural Dale. Their parents trusted that their daughters would be safe in their quiet neighborhood. But evil has no boundaries. And on that day, it came disguised as a man with a story, a man pretending to search for a lost dog. That man's name was Roy Lee Ward. Roy Ward was 29 years old, drifting, dangerous, and already a predator long before he arrived in Dale. Pretending that he was searching for a lost dog, Ward approached the Payne residence and convinced Stacy to allow him to enter the house. He knew exactly what he wanted, and Stacy became his target. Knocking on the Payne family's door, he claimed he was searching for a missing dog. Harmless enough, right? Harmless enough for a polite teenager like Stacy to let him step inside. But what she didn't realize was that she had just let a killer into her home. When Ward entered and attacked Stacy with a knife, Stacy was tied with nylon thread, raped, hit on the head with a 3-pound weight. Her throat was cut and her abdomen was cut almost in half. Thereafter, Melissa awoke to the sound of Stacy screaming. Racing to the top of the stairs, Melissa froze in horror. And when she rushed downstairs, she saw something that would scar her forever. Ward on top of Stacy, knife in hand, Stacy begging for her life. Melissa then ran to her parents' room and dialed 911 frantic, describing the horror unfolding below. As she was talking on the telephone, Melissa could hear her sister saying, "Please stop." Shortly thereafter, the Daletown marshal arrived and saw Ward standing in the doorway, covered with perspiration and holding a knife. Drawing his service revolver, the marshal ordered Ward to the ground. Ward complied, saying, "I didn't do anything." The marshal then went to the kitchen. The scene was unspeakable. Found Stacy lying on the floor, nude from the waist down, covered with blood and her intestines exposed. Although conscious, Stacy could not speak. Stacy's throat had been cut to the windpipe, her torso slashed open, her wrist nearly severed. And yet, she was still alive when first responders reached her. Conscious, breathing, bleeding out. She lived for several minutes, suffering every ounce of pain Ward inflicted. It was the kind of murder that prosecutors call the worst of the worst. She was taken immediately to the emergency room of the Deaconess St. Joseph Hospital, where doctors noted a laceration to Stacy's abdomen, a laceration to her back that severed her spine, and a laceration across Stacy's neck, cutting her trachea. Efforts to save Stacy's life were unsuccessful. The doctors' faces were very somber, and the workers had to continue cleaning the pools of blood from this little girl's wounds. He was arrested at the home just a few minutes after the 911 call. Ward was arrested on the spot. There was no mystery, no whodunit. The autopsy, or the forensic report, was devastating. A subsequent forensic examination revealed that Stacy suffered 18 blunt force injuries, including injuries found within the vaginal vault, knife wounds across her body, and evidence of sexual assault so brutal it left investigators shaken. Even seasoned detectives struggled to look at the evidence. This was not just a murder, it was torture. The conclusion was clear. Roy Lee Ward had raped and murdered Stacy Payne in one of the most savage crimes Indiana had ever seen. Community reaction is one of stunned disbelief after the news of 15-year-old Stacy Payne's murder Wednesday afternoon in her own home outside of Dale. Things like this just don't happen in small towns like Dale. Indiana is a common reaction to the news that has parents hugging their children, locking their doors and grieving with the Payne family. That a vigil was held for Stacy, attended by nearly 1,200 people. More than 500 mourners attended her funeral. About a month before the trial, at a hearing where Ward appeared, an angry crowd yelled at Ward as he was being escorted through the courthouse rotunda. The trial court admonished the crowd for their behavior. In this case, the news reports were extensive, detailed, and graphic. However, they were largely accurate accounts of a horrific and brutal killing. On the other hand, several of the news articles recounted Ward's criminal history, the trial and sentencing. In this case, the pattern of deep and bitter hostility shown to be present throughout the community was clearly reflected in the juror questionnaire. Stacy Payne's torso was nearly sliced in two, her throat was cut to her windpipe, and her wrist was slashed to the bone. She was nevertheless alive for a short time. Vaginal bruising and Stacy's DNA on Ward's genitals supported the rape and criminal deviant conduct charges. Ward was on probation for a burglary in Missouri at the time of the crime and had a dozen prior convictions. Ward's long criminal record, which included at least 8 prior convictions extending back to 1993, aggravating circumstances, rape, deviant criminal conduct, being on parole or probation at the time of the crime, and mutilation and torture. June 8, 2007, Vanderburgh Superior Court. Judge Robert Pigman sentenced Roy Lee Ward to death for the July 11, 2001 rape and murder of Dale, Ind. Teenager Stacy Payne. Payne's mother, Julie Payne, gave a victim impact statement during the 30-minute hearing. Julie Payne stood between her daughter, Melissa, and husband Roger as she gave her statement in a voice trembling with emotion. "The things we feel most deeply are hardest to put into words," she said. As she described the ways Stacy Payne was hard-working, caring, and loved by all, Ward sat silently between his defense attorneys. He showed no emotion and declined the opportunity to offer his own statement. "It has been 6 horrible, long, hard years," Julie Payne said. "We have yearned for Stacy every day." She had just completed her freshman year of high school and was working her first job, saving every penny for her future plans, Julie Payne said. Her life was so short, but was filled with meaning. Pigman set Ward's execution date for June 8, 2008, before sunrise. However, an automatic appeal follows death penalty convictions, meaning the date is likely to be delayed. Roy Lee Ward was sentenced for the rape and murder of Dale, Indiana, teenager Stacy Payne, on July 11, 2001. After a week of often emotional testimony and graphic evidence presented during Ward's sentencing hearing, the jury took less than 45 minutes to recommend the death penalty. It marked the second time a jury has recommended Ward be sentenced to death for the crime. The earlier verdict of a Spencer County jury was overturned on appeal, and Ward was granted a new trial. Sentencing was scheduled for 1 p.m. in Vanderburgh Superior Court. Days before Ward's retrial was scheduled to begin, he pleaded guilty to rape and murder. In the Clay County, Indiana, jury was asked to decide only his sentence. After 5 days of testimony before Vanderburgh Superior Court Judge Robert, Pigman jurors lost their composure and wiped tears from their eyes as Spencer County Prosecutor John Dart recalled testimony during his closing arguments about how hard the 15-year-old fought to live. Dart said Payne lived for 4 hours after the attack. Kentucky forensic pathologist Donna Hunsaker testified about her findings from Payne's autopsy. Hunsaker said the slim, athletic cheerleader was bound with nylon twine, raped, beaten on the head with a 3-pound weight, slashed across her throat, and cut nearly in half across her midsection. During the week of testimony, Ward's defense attorneys Lorinda Young Court and Steve Rispra called psychologists to testify. The professionals described Ward as a psychopath devoid of emotion and conscience. Ward's mother, grandmother, and other relatives and acquaintances all said he should spend the rest of his life in prison. Ward's own attorneys told jurors to give him life in prison without parole, explaining he is too dangerous to live his life anywhere but behind bars. Some witnesses gave their opinions about Ward, the most representative responses being, "Tie him up with rawhide in the desert and let him die slowly and painfully. They need to cut off his penis, shove it up her ass, and gut him like he did to her. The police officer should have shot that son of a bitch. He should be stoned. Prison would be too easy for him. Death penalty, no doubt. He's guilty. He shouldn't even deserve a trial. He should receive the same punishment they gave the victim. They should do to him what they did to her. They would have to prove to me that Ward didn't commit the murder. They should make him suffer, hang him, shoot him, put him in the electric chair, or gas him. How can he be innocent?" Decades, OF appeals, or for more than 2 decades, Ward's case bounced through state and federal courts. In 2017, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear his appeal. Indiana courts repeatedly upheld the sentence. His lawyers argued everything: his autism, his alleged misdiagnosis, the shrouded secrecy of Indiana's lethal injection protocol, and even whether executions with Pentobarbital cause unconstitutional torture. But year after year, one word came back: denied. The cleansing machine. Indiana's death penalty returns. Or for more than 15 years, Indiana carried out no executions. But in December 2024, the state resumed death sentences, executing Joseph Corcoran. Then in May 2025, Benjamin Ritchie, convicted of killing a police officer, was put to death. Witnesses described Ritchie's body lurching upward, spasming as if drowning, even though officials swore Pentobarbital was humane. Now, Ward is next. And the timing? Chilling. Indiana admitted it had 3 sets of Pentobarbital, but 2 expire at the end of October 2025. Ward's execution falls just days before. Coincidence? Or a state ensuring it uses its expensive drugs before they rot? Remember, each dose costs taxpayers $275,000 to $300,000. Indiana has already burned through $600,000 worth of expired drugs, literally destroying them with kitty litter or burning them in prison furnaces. The clemency hearing score on September 24, 2025, the Indiana Parole Board met to decide whether Roy Lee Ward deserved mercy. Ward didn't show up. He said his autism made communication difficult, and he feared his words would be twisted. Instead, his lawyers pleaded for his life. They said Ward had shown consistent remorse, and that autism, not psychopathy, explained his crime. But the board wasn't moved. Chairwoman Gwen Horth said Stacy's suffering stood out among thousands of cases, that her final minutes alive were uniquely cruel. They voted against clemency. Days later, Governor Mike Brown accepted their recommendation. Ward would die. The final days. Or inside the Indiana State Prison in Michigan City, preparations have begun. Ward spends 23 hours a day in a solitary cell. The clock ticks toward October 10th. His lawyers keep filing motions, demanding transparency about the execution drugs. But the courts have closed their doors. The Indiana Supreme Court finalized the execution date. The U.S. Supreme Court has refused to intervene before. For Ward, there are no more doors to knock on. And for Stacy Payne's family, after 24 years of appeals, the waiting may finally end. The needle, or in the execution chamber, Ward will be strapped to a gurney. 4 lines inserted. The warden will read the order. The blinds may close, because in Indiana, the press isn't guaranteed to witness executions. A syringe of Pentobarbital will flow into his veins. If it works as intended, Ward will lose consciousness in under a minute. But critics say the drug often causes flash pulmonary edema, fluid flooding the lungs, the feeling of drowning. It may look peaceful, or it may look like Richie, lurching upward, gasping as poison floods the body. Either way, the state will declare him dead. Justice or vengeance? Underscore for Stacy Payne's family. October 10th is justice. They've waited nearly a quarter century. For Ward's defenders, it's vengeance, the execution of a man with autism, whose trial never gave jurors the full picture. And for Indiana taxpayers, it's another $300,000 injection. Another dose, bought in secrecy, administered in silence, buried behind prison walls. What's undeniable is this. In just days, Roy Lee Ward will become the 3rd man executed since Indiana restarted its death penalty machine.